Welcome back, everybody, to the Calaveria podcast, your one-stop shop for all things supernatural. I'm your host, Jose.
And I'm your host, Samantha.
And that's right, everybody. We are back with a brand new episode about a month later now, or 2 months, I guess, because our last one came out at the end of June, and this one's going to be like mid-August, or not even mid-August, but early August. But nonetheless, we are back with a brand new episode. And Samantha, it has been a year of the podcast since we last posted. When we posted our last episode, it was at the end of June, like I mentioned. And we did say that basically our anniversary was on July 5th. Or whenever this comes up, it's going to be like a year and a month for us. So last time we were talking about how just excited we were for that and how happy we were to see how far we have came. What are your thoughts, Samantha? 1 year.
It definitely hasn't felt like 1 year, but it also has felt like more than a year. Like it's kind of just like a weird time thing to think about. We've been working on this, like I believe you said already, we worked on this well before we posted the podcast episode, our first episode, right? And so this was always in development. We always talked about like starting the podcast or the YouTube channel. So it feels longer than a year, but also shorter than a year because it feels like we barely just started and we're barely continuing our journey in this podcast.
Yeah, it's like a year of anything, you think of like a year at a job, it's like a long time, but at the same time, it's not that long, especially with podcasting. It's one of those things where, like, even 2 years into it, you're still pretty brand new because you're always learning, getting better, doing different things. And like Samantha said, we have been doing this for a while, and there's always a lot of like behind the scenes stuff for anybody who does any sort of like content, whether it's podcast, YouTube, whatever it is. You know what goes into that stuff. You always have to, like, it has a lot of thinking, a lot of brainstorming, a lot of like workshopping, and that's exactly what went into this. But 1 year, thank you guys so much for listening to us and keeping us going. And for those of you who have been with us for a while, just thank you guys so much. I see that we're continuing to grow, and it's just pushes us to do more. Every single time that I see we get like a new follower or something, or even just a new review, it always like pushes us to do more. And I just want to say thank you guys so much. And this is our 1 year anniversary. A little bit late now, but 1 year of the podcast. And this is to many, many more. So with all that being said, we are now entering this era or this time of year. For many people, it's back to school season. Whether you are parents who you're like taking your kids back to school, or you're going back to school yourself. Samantha and I are both going back to school. I mentioned this the last episode, which is why this is coming out so late, is because of the fact that I have officially started my back to school process, and I've actually had a couple classes now. And by the time this episode comes out, school may be starting for most people, or maybe about to start. And I know that's the case for Samantha and I. And so with that, I just want to say, everybody, do your best, go, like, push yourself. Always like strive to do the best you can. Education is very important, whether, you are in high school or college or middle school, whatever the case is. It's always good to do your best. And, we really support education here. So for everybody out there, give it your best. And I hope you guys have an amazing school year. And so now that we got that out of the way, our little PSA, last time we talked about, are we getting into spooky season? And now, Samantha, I think I have to say, it is definitely spooky season.
It definitely is. If you guys are just like us, we like horror and honestly just all things horror. So you probably know about horror nights at Universal Studios. And what we recently learned about is that Horror Nights is actually going to have one of their mazes or one of their attractions be, I forgot what they title it. Like,
it was like monstros, like Latin American monsters.
Yeah, and so they usually have it, but it's like American monsters, so like classics, and stuff like that. But this time they're having, like Latin American folklore monsters, stuff that we've covered in on this podcast that isn't just the classic La Llorona or anything like that. It's actual cool, interesting, not so well known folklore. And so I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I mean that's not to say that La Llorona isn't like interesting, right? This is like for many Mexican people, that's our culture, and we hold that very near and dear. It is really cool that they're doing these more, I guess, lesser known legends. And for those of you who are interested in these things, I mean, chances are you've probably heard of some of them, but it's very cool that like our culture is being spread throughout different, I guess, genres, right? So like you're seeing more representation in movies and this and that, but now even in like the horror field, where like Samantha said, usually it's the same stuff, right? Zombies, vampires, this and that. It's like a lot of remake. Everybody likes to recycle these same things, year in year out. Where now we're starting to incorporate more things because, as we, I hope we've proven in this podcast, is that there is like an endless supply of horror. There is a whole world out there that many people have not even tapped into, that we haven't tapped into. And it's so cool to see that it's starting to spread. It would be very interesting to see that actually in person. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe we may have to go. It seems very, very fun. I know last year, I believe it was, they did something similar, but this time it seems like they're incorporating more stuff.
Another thing I saw recently, and I'm pretty sure if you guys are keeping up with the news and everything, I saw that the government has exposed, I guess, someone in the government exposed that we have been in contact with aliens and that they live among us. What have you heard about that or?
I've seen a lot of things like that. Like honestly, when it comes to this is the thing, right? I personally do believe like okay, there are aliens out there. Like I don't think we're the literally like the only beings in the entire universe. I find that very hard to believe. But I don't really delve into that like whole field because when you do, you run into like different types of people. And one of those are like the conspiracy theorist, and like there's like one of two ways that you go down. Either you go down to people who are saying like, like aliens are here, they've been here, okay, like I guess like normal stuff. But then you go people, or you go into the other one where it's like people are saying that like they're government conspiracies and this and that, and Obama's a lizard person and all this and that. And like, that kind of deters me away from that stuff. I didn't want to pay too much attention to it, but that is very interesting. I knew it was like bound to happen. I was seeing stuff on the news saying that there were going to be hearings about it, that they're going to like, you know, uh, have like a congressional hearing. I think it was that like basically talked about it. And yeah, like you said, it came out. But I mean, I think there is one thing I seen. I know I just said I don't really like to get into the conspiracies, but I did see something that did catch my attention. Somebody pointed out how like it was like a map basically of like UFO sightings, and it's like the overwhelming majority of sightings have been in the US. Like there have been some all over the world, but for some strange reason, the overwhelming majority of them take place in the US. And they said something as like maybe this is our government trying to distract us from something, and for them to come out at this time and literally confirm it, where it seems like for so long they've been trying to hide them or hide the fact that there are these extraterrestrial beings. It does get one to think like what is really happening.
I know I saw a lot of people talking about that as well. They like when it was confirmed, people were like, "Okay, like I thought we confirmed this a bit ago with you guys." Like I remember like there was also like other news about like the government confirming like UFO sightings or something like that. And so people were like, "Okay, why are you bringing it up again? Like what are you trying to hide?" Cuz I know it's pretty popular for like the government or like the news like to throw up a story that's very eye-catching, very like surprising, and everyone's like, "Whoa, what the heck?" And then people will say like, "Oh no, it's just a distraction from this other thing that the government is actually doing." Like, "Oh no, there was this big tragedy that happened in like a whole nother country, like, and it's not even getting as much news coverage because oh no, this other exciting thing is happening." And I heard people talking about like, what are they trying to cover up? And I thought that was, I honestly, I was immediately thinking about that. I was just like, what the heck is going on? Like, why are they finally saying, yeah, no, we've been talking to him? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very valid. I think there's like to a certain extent that like I will dive into like these theories, but once you start talking about politicians being this and that, and New World Order, all that stuff. I'm like, okay, that's when I just you turn me off from that. Like I'm not diving into that. But it is very strange because I feel like there are very real world examples of what you were saying, where it's like something doesn't get coverage because, oh, look at this over here, looks, it's nice and shiny, whereas over here, this other thing, they're like, that's not that interesting. People don't want to hear about that, and it is very sad how that happens. But I don't know, like, what are we supposed to do with this information, right? The only thing I will say that came about all this is, like, I'm starting to see a lot more memes on TikTok, and some of them are pretty funny.
I definitely have seen a few people post memes. I've seen some where they're like, "Oh, me and my friends tricking the aliens into going like just doing dumb stuff basically."
I've seen a lot of those. Some even in Spanish, they're pretty funny too, where it's like tricking the aliens to like say something specifically, and it's like the alien just looking at you like, "Why the hell did you make me say that?" Like, people. I mean, no matter what happens, people will always find a way to make jokes out of anything. If there's nothing else, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce today's episode. Today we have a Folklore Friday episode for you guys, and it's a very special one because we haven't talked about anything specifically from this region, and that is Kuchisake-Onna, or the Slit-Mouthed Woman. It is said that during the Japanese Heian period, or Edo period, a gruesome story emerged. It is reported that there was a beautiful woman who was married to a samurai. She was very much aware of her beauty, and as such was known to be vain. It could be that she believed she deserved more, so one day she cheated on her husband. It wasn't long until he found out and became enraged. What he did next changed her life forever. Consumed by anger, the samurai decided to take matters into his own hands. He slit her mouth from ear to ear, leaving her with a permanent and morbid smile. He then asked her, "Who will think you're pretty now?" Other versions of the tale tell of a jealous woman that attacks her due to her beauty, disfiguring her forever. A failed cosmetic surgery leaving her with a horrific smile, or simply of a woman with razor-sharp teeth. Nonetheless, in each iteration, the woman becomes what is known as an onryo, or a vengeful spirit, that is capable of causing harm to the living. As a result of her misfortune, she was given the name Kuchisake-Onna, or the Slit-Mouthed Woman. It isn't hard to see why she would be out for revenge, but how exactly does she do so? Corey was excited for his trip to Japan. It would be his first time visiting and his first time as a solo traveler. Admittedly, he was scared, but he made sure to do all kinds of research, scouring internet forums to get advice from experienced solo travelers, many of which assured him they had nothing to worry about. After all, he would be traveling to Japan, one of the safest countries in the world. He soon came to his senses and realized that his worries were nothing more than paranoia. He began counting down the days until his departure. He had been planning this trip for more than a year, and now the day was finally here. Finally, 1 year and one 11-hour flight later, he made it. Tokyo, where he would be spending the next week exploring, sightseeing, partying, and hopefully making friends along the way. To his pleasant surprise, everything had been going to plan. His first few days had been great. He did everything any normal tourist would, but he soon wanted more. He wanted to experience the real Tokyo, not what he came to call tourist Tokyo. Luckily for him, he had met a group of friendly locals and decided to reach out to them one night to see if they would be willing to give him the real Tokyo experience. To his pleasant surprise, they were more than willing to do so. It wasn't their friendliness that surprised him though, it was their eagerness to do so. They tried convincing Corey to meet them that very moment. It's late. Why would they be out at this hour? He thought. He didn't expect to hear back from any of them until the following day. Not right now, he replied. What are you all doing out so late? Don't you have work in the morning? He followed up.
You're right. How about tomorrow night?
They asked.
Tomorrow's perfect,
He replied. It was settled then. The next day came and he met with his new friends, Kenji, Yuki, and Mei. They gave Corey a proper tour of Tokyo as best as they could. They took Corey to their favorite shops, restaurants, and bars. So far, it was the highlight of his whole trip. The night was still young, and they decided to take Corey to what they called a real nightclub. Corey asked over and over again exactly where they would be taking him, but they just told him it would be a surprise. They assured him he would have a great time. Once they had arrived, May told the rest of the group to wait while she spoke with a friend of hers that worked in the club. Corey watched as May spoke to who he assumed to be the club's bouncer. Puzzled as to why it seemed as if the bouncer was staring directly at him, slowly forming a smile. She returned and told the group to follow her inside. As they walked inside, Corey quickly noticed he was the only foreigner there. But before he could even ask why that was, Kenji forced a drink into his hands and urged him to drink. And he did exactly that. He brushed off the fact that he was the only foreigner there, as far as he could tell, and decided he'd let loose and enjoy the night. Drink after drink, Corey felt as though the night couldn't get any better. As expected, Corey was soon drunk and continued to drink more and more. After all, his friends were nice enough to buy him drinks, so why wouldn't he? It didn't take long for Corey to black out. He had never been a heavy drinker, but then again, he had never been to Japan before. After coming to his senses, he found himself in an alleyway.
What happened?
He asked himself.
Where am I?
Lost and confused, he reached for his phone, only to find nothing there. He checked all of his pockets. All empty. Phone gone. Wallet gone. Friends? Where were they? Looking around, he saw no one. The only thing he could see was the dimly lit street lamp at the end of the alley. He started walking towards it, and halfway there, he saw what he thought to be a person. He called out,
Excuse me?
Nothing. Again.
Excuse me? Hello?
As he got closer, he realized it was a woman. She had her back turned to him.
Hello? Please, miss, I need your help. I lost my phone, my wallet, my...
She turned around.
Am I beautiful?
What?
He noticed she was wearing a face covering. She stared at him.
Yeah, please, miss, I need your help. I lost my phone. I don't know where my friends are. I don't know where I'm at. Can you help me?
She slowly began to remove her face covering.
Am I still beautiful?
She asked again, revealing a gruesome wound. Her mouth had been slashed from ear to ear.
Yeah, I have to go now. Sorry.
Corey walked away as fast as he could. He was now on a main street. He began to run. What was that? What happened to her? He asked himself. Never mind that. His main concern was getting back to his hotel. He ran around frantically, not knowing where to go. Luckily for him, he ran into a police officer who noticed his frantic state. He explained to the officer that he was lost and was trying to find his way back to his hotel. He didn't mention having all of his belongings stolen. He just wanted to go back home. To his relief, the officer gave him directions to his hotel and even offered to take him there. He thanked the officer but declined his offer. He needed to get his head straight and felt that the walk would help him. Finally seeing his hotel in the distance, he felt a sense of relief. As he approached the main entrance, he noticed a sign posted on the door that read, "Door access unavailable. Please use rear entrance." The automatic doors were down. Now he would have to walk through the nearby alleyway to use the rear entrance. He didn't let this get him down though. He made it back, and that's all that mattered. He walked down the alley and spotted the rear entrance. As he approached, a woman walked out and held the door open for him. He thought she looked familiar, but he couldn't see her face. He grabbed the door and said, "Thank you, arigato," and began to head inside. But before he could even press the button for an elevator, he felt a sharp pain in his back. The last thing he saw as he fell was the blood-filled, man-made smile that stretched from one of the woman's ear to the other. So, what you guys just heard was a short story that I actually wrote myself. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope it really conveyed, I guess, what this spirit does. And if not, we're going to break that down for you guys. So, this spirit, right? This, they call her like an onryo, which is known as like a vengeful spirit. What I seen in my research is that these spirits are, I don't know if it's mainly women, specifically to the Onryo title, but it is those spirits who have died like, very like gruesome deaths. Either they were murdered, they were wronged, whatever it is before their death, and which is, why they're so vengeful. You can kind of think of it as like a La Llorona type, where she is out for revenge. And basically, the main premise of this whole thing is that Kuchisake-Onna, or the Slit-Mouthed Woman, which I will refer to her as that from now on because I don't want to butcher the name. I'm trying my best to pronounce these Japanese terms, and I apologize if I butcher it. But the Slit-Mouthed Woman, the origin story is that she was mutilated by either a um, angry spouse, a jealous woman, cosmetic surgery gone wrong, or simply she was just a woman that was born like that with like razor sharp teeth. Hence the fact that she wants to like hide that scars on her face and or that smile, which is why people say that she usually wears like a surgical mask, some sort of face covering, something in general so that you can't see that. And what she does in the story where Corey meets her, she asks him right away, "Am I beautiful?" or "Watashi kirei," which translates to "Am I beautiful?" Now, this is where, things can go south really quickly, or, you can probably potentially get away with it. So, Samantha, tell us, what are the options here?
So the options are plain and simple. You either say, no, you're not beautiful, and she straight up just kills you. You get the bad ending real quick. If you say yes, you get kind of like a continued story of, well, how about now when, we see in the story that you created, Corey says, like, yes, you're beautiful. Like, okay, what else? Like, help me. And she slowly removes the mask to reveal her slit mouth. And then from there, she asks, well, how about now? Am I still pretty? And from there, if you say no, she kills you. She'll slit you in half, is what I've seen people say. Like, she'll cut you down the middle. But if you say yes, she'll carve the same smile on your face and basically be like, well, you're just as pretty as me now. And so those are the endings, basically.
Yeah, and then in my iteration of the story, as you've seen, right, like Corey didn't necessarily get that same like smile. You see these, varying like these different sources that you look at, but some of them say, like Samantha just said, that she will give you that same smile, or it is said that she follows that person home and will wait until they're inside to kill them, or she will kill them at night when they least expect it. So in this case, obviously Corey isn't from Japan, but his home necessarily is the hotel. So it waits until he goes in the hotel to kill him. I believe the Japanese translation for "Am I Still Beautiful" is "Kore demo."
Yeah, it basically she repeats her question and like as "Kore demo," and it means like even now, or like even with this on my face, like am I still beautiful? It's asking like, well, is it still true, basically?
She, basically wants to like trip you up, and there actually is some ways to get around this, believe it or not. So it's not just like a lose-lose streak because, you think about it, either way, you're either going to die or you're going to get mutilated yourself. But there actually are ways to get around this. So what many sources say is that you can do one of two things. And actually, I'm not going to say many. The majority of them say you can do one, but then I found an alternative on another source that I didn't really see anywhere else. The first one and the most common one that people say is to respond yes to the first answer, right? Am I beautiful? Yes, you are. When she takes off her mask and she says, "Am I still beautiful now?" you are supposed to say something as like along the lines of like so or yeah, you're average. And what they say happens is that, she kind of gets confused by this answer because she's just so used to the yes or the no. she's not used to like, I guess you could think of it as like somebody who's just so used to being praised, and then you tell them like you're like, you're whatever, and they're just like they don't even know how to react. You could think of it like that.
It's kind of like she's expecting you to be surprised in one way. Like either you think she's beautiful or you think she's the scariest thing you've ever seen. So for someone to just be like, you're okay, and act normal to it, she's like, what? And so I've seen people say like, oh, if you say that, it gives you time to run away from her and she won't get to you as fast, basically. I know another iteration of I saw how like you could distract her is with by throwing money at her or hard candy at her. And like she'll get distracted by it because she's like, oh, let me go pick this up, basically. And you'll be able to have time to run away without having to answer the questions.
Yeah, and that's actually the one that I was going to talk about next, where it's like I didn't really see that in too many places. I only saw that in one source, but it is kind of weird because they say that's like she's just like, okay, well, what do I do now? And so her just only instinct is like, let me pick this up. And in both of these, it basically is just to give you time to run away. So we have no idea whether or not she still chases after you or if she's just like, whatever, I can't get this person, but that's pretty much, a one and done deal right there. So, if you guys are ever in Japan or if we have any Japanese listeners and you encounter the Slit-Mouthed Woman, there you go. Hopefully we helped you guys out with that.
Obviously, you discussed the origins of the Slit-Mouthed Woman. And, this story wasn't always so popular. It wasn't always as well known. Actually, back in the 1970s, Japan saw a big resurgence of the telling of the story. And this time, it wasn't just among like the general public. It was among students attending cram school. And cram school usually ends in the night, which is usually like when people will see this woman. And so it makes sense like why so many people started see like so many children claim to like have seen and encountered with this strange woman, leading to like the story spreading rapidly throughout Japan. And it even reached like teachers and their parents who like quickly concerned like, oh my god, my children are seeing this strange woman with all these markings on her face that are saying that that she's gonna attack them. Like that's so scary. And what ended up happening is that teachers would walk students home at night after cram school, and the police even doubled up on their patrol in hopes of just catching this like deranged woman that these children were reporting. And obviously, like it's concerning when people are like, "Oh my god, your little kid comes up to you like, "Oh my god, my friend said that she saw this lady and she had a scary mouth." Like people are going to be like, "What the heck?"
Yeah, imagine your kid coming up to you and telling you that story that we just told you. This lady with just a ginormous, like I think of him like the Joker smile, like that, like just slit all the way across, like unhinged everything, like that is scary. Like where did you come up with that?
It is. And so like imagine like you hear this from your kid and maybe you're thinking like your kid's a little dumb, like I maybe shouldn't trust them. You go on the news and the police is now telling everybody, do not trust women in surgical masks late at night that try to ask you if they're pretty. Like I'm gonna be scared.
No, yeah, because then you start thinking like, you know what? Maybe you guys were onto something.
Yeah, like the police are saying stuff, the teachers are saying stuff, everyone's scared. And so that's what happened in the 1970s in Japan. Just this big resurgence from students like late at night coming out of their cram school, supposedly seeing this entity, like this ghost, late at night trying to attack them. And of course, these concerns were just concerns. And there was never really like any actual evidence of like actual murders of students that would follow like the urban legend characteristics. No one was cut in half, no one had the slit mouth like supposedly she had. The closest that there ever was to like a real life case similar to the story was seen back in 2007 by a coroner who was going through like old obituary records, and the coroner had noticed the records of a woman who was known to chase after children, I guess late at night, and she was run over by a car. But there was no markings on her that had like the slit mouth. There was nothing in particular about that. She was just known to chase after children late at night, and she was run over. And it was actually this discovery back in 2007 that would lead to even more uprise about people talking about it. And at this time, the internet is starting to like boom a little. More people are like using it. It's the 2000s. People are becoming more aware of it, And because of that, And then because of the growing accessibility of the internet, this urban legend began to spread across the world. And it reached Korea in 2004, and a common version of this legend in Korea was actually different. Instead of a lady wearing just a normal surgical mask, distinctively she was wearing a red surgical mask. And instead of being a victim of someone attacking her, it's actually a victim of terrible plastic surgery. And people say it's likely due to the, at the time, current Korean obsession of plastic surgery. People were obsessed with it, getting it, and they've heard so many like terrible stories of botched surgeries that I guess that's kind of like their version of the story. And I wasn't sure if you had heard about that one or not, and if you had, I was curious on what your thoughts were.
No, I haven't. I didn't hear about that. I guess it's like similar to how La Llorona everywhere. She's very different, or with these different legends, how they kind of change. Or also like El Silbón, where like it is in Colombia and Venezuela, and you have these different iterations. But I think that is very interesting. I guess that's where I said there are different iterations of it. That's where that cosmetic surgery one came from, and no, I didn't see that anywhere in mine. So that's interesting how it kind of spread over there, and they kind of took it and ran with it. So like to deter people, because I know they say that initially the first like telling of it back in the early Heian or the Edo period was to deter people from, I guess, infidelity. Mainly women, obviously in this case it's a woman, so it's like kind of like, hey, don't cheat on your husband because look at what's gonna happen to you.
Yeah, I found it like pretty interesting how like it changed from that all the way into like a story of plastic surgery just because of at the time in Korea. That's what kind of most people were concerned about, and also like it was just all over the news, all over everything, the media, you know how they are with like their celebrities and such. I'm sure that's why that at the time that was their story. Nowadays, many who are into horror and or like the supernatural like us must have heard of this urban legend of the Slit-Mouthed Woman at least once. Because of this, her story has been adapted into like many different movies. And I'm going to talk about obviously the most popular one, since those smaller ones are kind of hard to track down. The most popular one was actually created in 2007, called Carved, the Slit-Mouthed Woman. Looking into it, I saw many good reviews, but also many believe that it's the director's like less best work, I guess. Like it's not as best as like his other ones or whatever. But they said it is like an interesting, scary watch, and that if you're just looking for a good like horror Japanese like movie, it's pretty good. And so I've been interested in watching it. I don't know if you saw it when you were doing your research, but it looked pretty interesting.
Yeah, I seen that was one that like popped out. Like if you just search up the Slit-Mouthed Woman, not necessarily the I guess the Japanese term for her, but search up the Slit-Mouthed Woman, and that's one of the first things that pop up is that movie. But I also did see that like she's also been referenced or included in like other, like you said, there has been other movies, but even like TV shows.
Yeah, I know one of like our like we like anime, so like I know in one of our animes, Mob Psycho, like she was referenced in one of those animes, and also in just a lot of different horror animes. She's just a well-known like horror icon in Japan, basically, because of just the big crazes that have been going on and that went on in its past. And I actually want to talk about how the movie Carved, the Slit-Mouthed Woman, just interprets her story, and kind of just like a short, small paragraph about like how like they change it and like what the character goes through to get her cut on her face. So this like short iteration is actually from the villains wiki of the movie. You can easily search it up when you look up the movie. I think it's the first thing that pops up. It gives you a good rundown of the whole movie. But I'm just gonna go ahead and read this because I feel like it changes it quite a lot. But I found it pretty interesting how the director interpreted her story. The Kuchisake-Onna was once a human mother stuck with a horrible cold, so she constantly wore a surgical mask. However, her sickness was so stressful that she took her stress out on her 3 children, constantly abusing them to make it go away. Eventually, 2 of her children died from those injuries, and there was only 1 child left. The mother then gave her last child a large kitchen knife and asked her to stab her neck, because she didn't want to kill him due to his injuries. She told him, "If you don't kill me, you might end up like the others." He refused to kill her. She yelled, "You'll end up like them," and took a large pair of scissors, going to stab him to death. But with the kitchen knife in his hands, the boy quickly slit her mouth from ear to ear before the scissors could stab him. She died from bleeding to death. Very quickly, her son decided to hide her body in the living room closet. The mother then lived on as a vengeful spirit, the Kuchisake-Onna, who kidnaps children, at least 3 a day, tying them up in her basement and killing them off there, or slitting their mouths from ear to ear. And so, as we see here, the director changes the story pretty, I feel like pretty drastically. In this one, she's a mother, she's very abusive, and I thought it was pretty interesting. What did you think about that?
I guess you could see where he kind of like spun this and like how, I guess not how, but more like why he did that. And I guess that would be with the resurgence, like you said, in the 1970s of all these like school children just spreading this urban legend around and like being terrified of it and turning it into one of those, cautionary tales too, where it's like, hey, you kids better behave because this lady's out, to basically kill children. And I think that's where you kind of see that influence is from this, I guess craze in the 1970s. So I think that's interesting, but I'm glad that you mentioned that part in that little summary where she uses like scissors. That was something I forgot to mention. Is that she is like seen holding either like some sort of like knife, scissors. They say like a scythe or like a scythe.
Scythe, yeah.
I don't know how to say that word, but some sort of like sharp object, and I forgot to mention that. But I don't know if necessarily you can literally see her holding this, or this is just like her weapon of choice in general. But I forgot to mention that, so I'm glad you mentioned that here.
I also forgot to mention that, when doing my research, you obviously see her, and doing my research on the movie, I saw obviously their iteration of her, and she was holding her weapon of choice, which was the scissors and such like that. And I thought that was pretty interesting how throughout it, there's a bunch of different weapons that people obviously give her. I feel like the two most common ones being the knife and the scissors, though. She doesn't only just appear in movies, though. Like you were saying earlier, she has appeared in shows and such and everything like that. And I said she's a popular horror icon in Japan. She's also seen in many mangas, animes, and video games. Some of these specifically being the manga Kuchisake-Onna Denetsu by the author Kanako and Unuki. Sorry if I mispronounced that or just butchered it all over. I apologize. But in this manga, it's her own manga. It's written about her and it has some beautiful art. You could easily just find it on Google, and it has pretty positive ratings. If you're into manga, I'd recommend reading it. It looks pretty interesting when I was looking into it. But obviously I said video games, and I found a pretty interesting video game that isn't worth too much on Steam, and it didn't look too hard, but also looks like it could be pretty fun to do. It's called Slit-Mouthed by the developer Nyx Tales. And both of these works had pretty positive ratings. Like I said, you could easily find the manga online. You could find it on Amazon. Pretty easy to find. But like I was saying, the game, it was pretty cheap. It was only $4.99 on Steam. And so I was thinking about playing it maybe sometime in the future. It looks pretty cool. It is by an indie developer, so their graphics aren't the best, but it looks cool. People had some pretty positive ratings. Some people didn't like it. Obviously, they're gonna say what they want to say. But overall, it had positive ratings.
That would be really cool to play that. I mean, for those of you that don't know, Samantha and I are really big on gaming and anime as well. I don't necessarily get into manga much, but that is interesting that this is just transcended into something more than just an urban legend. It is in the media now and, all over basically Japan and now the world.
Definitely. I found it very interesting to just go through this urban legend of the Slit-Mouthed Woman and just seeing all its iterations and all its resurgence and just the chilling media it has inspired. I really enjoyed going over this, and I hope you guys did too with us.
Yeah, this was very fun to do because, like I mentioned in the beginning, it's one that we have never been, or never really covered anything in I guess this region and Asia in general, right? I know mainly our things tend to deal with Latin America or I mean in the US. So it's always interesting to cover things that are outside of like our scope because as you guys like heard this episode, it is very interesting and there are some good stories out there. So we will be sure to definitely cover more stories like this later on in the future.
But always before we end it off, guys, we have to talk about a TikTok. And I feel like I found you guys a very interesting and honestly like scary one. Like when I was watching this, it was late at night and I was just like, oh hell no, this is scary. It's very creepy. And I'll quickly explain what it is. Basically, it's this woman. She's late at night, she's in her room, and she hears like outside of her room or like outside of like wherever she is just loud meowing, and she's like, what the heck, like I don't have a cat, like what's meowing for me? And it almost feels like it's meowing for her to like get out and go after it, like come here, like come towards me. And she keeps hearing it and hearing it, and so she starts recording and she's like, what is that, like what is that, like why is there a cat out there? And she starts recording it, and obviously she has her flash on trying to see what it is. And slowly as she zooms in saying like, what are you, like where are you, you aren't a cat, I don't have a cat, like this can't be a cat, you just see the outline of almost like a person laying on the ground just staring at her while meowing perfectly like a cat, and it's creepy. And when I sent you this, like what were your first thoughts?
So I seen this video, like you said, late at night too, and I was just thinking, like, why the hell am I looking at this? Like, I'm sure most people can relate. If you get something scary, that pops up on your For You page on TikTok, it's just one of those things where it's just like, of course, this has to happen now. But I thought it was so creepy to think that, like, you know, it's kind of like I think what people were saying is that like it's like a bruja basically that like kind of like turned into a cat or whatever because like you said it sounds just like a cat. I thought it was crazy to think that like to imagine like somebody in your home trying to lure you out and for one like you've heard stuff like oh there's nothing scarier than like a baby crying at night and you don't even have a baby,
Yeah.
something like that. And so like this is like a perfect example of that. Like you hear a cat, it seems like it's like in her living room or like another room, but she doesn't own a cat, and she says that over and over again, like you're not a cat, what do you want? And when she says something like who do you want, she specifically asks like who do you want? And like you kind of hear that she's with like who you assume maybe like a daughter of hers or somebody younger, right? Another younger child basically, and kind of whimpering in the background like do you want, you would assume that she says like herself or the girl or the child, like who is it that you want? And so when I seen that I was just already like I had to kind of pull the phone away like far off into like my peripheral vision so that I wouldn't really see it but also be looking at it at the same time because I don't want to miss it, and I'm like I don't want to see anything pop up.
I knew as soon as I had noticed like the thing lying down and just like kind of staring at them, I immediately paused it and just went through the comments because I was just like, no, like this is creepy. And the comments, they all agreed this is creepy as hell. A lot of them always like are you like, why do I always see these things at night? Like, oh, now I can't sleep. And I thought that was so funny. Just like how everyone seems to always get these scary TikToks. And I would like to mention this is again by, we didn't call out this person, but we noticed them because their name was really cool, and their TikTok name was obviously El Cucuy, and it's like a very cool name to have. I feel like it fits perfectly with this type of TikToks, like the scary nature and everything like that. And they delivered again. This is creepy as hell.
And we can't skip over the like ending, right? So at the very end you see, I guess like okay, you say you made out a woman laying down. I didn't really see that. My eyes were kind of like, I mean it's hard, it's dark, like Samantha said, she's the woman's trying to like make out what it is with her phone flash, but like it's very obscure as to like what the shape is. But at the very end, I swear to God, it's very clear that you see a person just fully standing up and kind of like walk away. And that's kind of like where the video ends because like they freak out and it just cuts. Like that That is just so scary to think that not only, for one, maybe it's a cat, whatever, shape shifting, it's not a person, this and that, but then for it to like kind of go away, it's like, okay, where are you going now? Like I would not leave that room at all after, I'm calling the cops, I'm calling anybody, but I am not getting out of there.
Yeah, so like when I saw that, immediately I thought like, okay, I was thinking it's like a person laying down. Obviously, they're saying it's like a witch and everything like that. So I'm thinking like it's this witch laying down, maybe like kind of like halfway, because people have said like witches can shapeshift. That's where like the La Chusa story kind of comes into, where it's a witch transforming that can transform into an owl, and that's kind of how that story is. And so immediately I'm thinking, okay, if this is a witch and it's mimicking a cat so well, like how do we know that this witch can't actually transform into one and is trying to, but it got caught in the act like before it could, so it's kind of just stuck like that, just trying to convince this lady, I'm a cat, give me your child, like it's something like I just make like trying to piece all this information and all this just scary stuff that's happening, and it's just like this video is just so creepy to me, and I want to hear what your guys' opinions are, obviously when we post this on our Instagram.
Yeah, for sure. And if you guys ever want to look at any pictures, you may be thinking, right, while you're listening to this, well, what does the Slit-Mouthed Woman look like? Be sure to check out our Instagram at calaveriapod. And you can also check out, any of our posts for these different stories that we have. All of our episodes have associated posts. So if you guys want to check out any of those, or even the TikToks that we mentioned at the end, they're all posted on Instagram. And also be sure to follow us on TikTok at Calaveria Pod. We do have some TikToks on there. I haven't posted in a while, so our followers have kind of just like stayed still. But I mean, yeah, be sure to give us a follow, check us out.
And if you guys have a story or anything you'd like us to cover on our podcast, feel free to send that in to us at our email at calaveriapod@gmail.com.
And also, don't forget to rate us and leave us a review on whatever podcasting app that you guys are listening on. It always helps us out. I mean, I mentioned in the beginning that we have been receiving a few more ratings and stuff. It really does help us get out there. It, puts us under like the recommended for, other shows. So it really helps with getting the show out there and, helping us grow. And it's always nice to see that people do support us. Well, with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.
Bye.